Hello and welcome to Strive, where we talk about security, technology, resilience and everything IT, all in a virtual environment. I'm Darren Thomson, your host and field CTO at Commvault, and I'm thrilled today to be joined by somebody that I've known actually for quite a few years, Dr. Jessica Barker, co-CEO of Cygenta and a leading voice in the psychology of cybersecurity. Jessica has just participated in a panel discussion at SHIFT in New York City, where she talked about the human factor of cyber resilience. Jessica, welcome to Strive.
Thanks.
Great to see you again. It's been a while.
It has.
And I've been looking forward to this discussion as well.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
So you've spent many years now talking about the human side of cybersecurity. Talk to us a little bit about some of the changes that you've seen in that period of time.
It's changed hugely. I think it's so much higher up the agenda that we talk about people, we talk about culture, we talk about things like empathy, we talk about stress, we talk about burnout. So it's fantastic. We're talking so much more about the human side of cybersecurity than I could have ever imagined when I joined the industry coming up for 15 years ago. But I still think we've got a way to go, and I'm excited to see what happens in the next few years.
Yeah, and I'm excited to explore a few things with you today. We're going to get to them, AI not being the least of them. But before we get there, talk to us a little about what's still missing. So I agree. You know, I've tried as well as a CISO to start to think about humans and the process side of things, the people side of things, despite me being a technologist. But typically, as you move around the world and you consult with organizations, what are people still missing? What are the big rocks that still need to be smashed there?
I think where we still have an opportunity and where we can still make advancements is understanding that the human side of cybersecurity isn't just awareness. So often I think when we say people and cybersecurity, like the shorthand is people always jump to awareness raising training. And that's one element, of course, but we know that people can be aware of something and it not change their behavior. We know there's so much more to the human element of cybersecurity when we think about systems thinking, when we think about behavior, when we think about culture. There's a lot more to this that we can actually get from fields like psychology, sociology, behavioral science in general. So I think we're going to keep seeing advancements, and I'm optimistic about what the future holds for the human side.
And I'm going to go there early. We're going to talk about AI. I'm so interested in your perspective on this, for good and for bad. Tell us, first of all, your general thoughts. AI is happening probably quicker than any of us could have predicted. As a CISO and a security analyst, I'm both scared and excited all at the same time.
Right.
How do you feel as a psychologist? Where is this going for you?
I feel the same, I think, and I should say I'm not a psychologist. I draw on psychology. I'm more of a sociologist by background, which means that I look more at kind of groups of people and behavior in general. So AI is fascinating in terms of that. And I feel the same as you. I think it's exciting, it's challenging, it's scary, it offers lots of opportunity. I think it's something that we can't stop from happening. I think it's all about how we understand AI, how we think about what this means for cybersecurity, and how we empower people not to be afraid of AI, but to understand the risks and the challenges. I think there's lots of opportunity in terms of helping burnout for security teams, in helping to make our tools more efficient. But I also think there are, of course, many dangers. One that we don't often talk about is automation bias. The fact that we can, as people, put more confidence in machines and in an automated system than we might in our own judgment. This is why people sometimes end up driving into a lake, because they follow their GPS system rather than just looking in front of them.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, me too. It's a human bias. It's something that we can all be inclined towards, but it's something we need to be increasingly aware of when it comes to AI.
Interesting, yeah. I'd love to get your take on something we're working on quite hard at Commvault right now, which is what we're calling conversational AI. So this idea that some of those automated systems, like a Commvault system, for example, are by their very nature technical and quite complicated. And so could we front end those systems with an interface that allows us just to speak English to the system? Now, there are obviously inherent risks within that. To your point, we could become over-reliant on it. But I'd love your perspective on that. Do you think that's a good idea in general? Being able to talk to systems in a human way, less of a programmy way, I suppose. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, and I think as well it takes away potentially that level of intimidation that people feel and some of the fear. So as much as I mentioned we can have this bias towards trusting automated systems, there's also this tendency for us to be scared of things that are new and that are technical. We can think back to trains, televisions, the radio, the internet, and AI. This fear can come along, which often isn't based in the actual risks and threats. So it can then cause more of a problem because we can't have a conversation about the true risks because people are scared of something else. So I think having that interface that takes away that technical fear is something that would be an interesting opportunity.
Yeah. Yes, it's going to be interesting to see how that develops. Now, I've read a lot of your work. I've seen you talk a lot about incident response, which is a subject very close to my heart. Obviously, something that Commvault are very deeply involved in. You know, our mission, if there's one mission right now, is to help people bounce back quicker.
Yeah.
If they are to be breached, how quickly can they get their clean, minimal viable company back as quickly as possible? It's interesting, as a security person that's been doing this a while, you know, it's interesting how the conversation changes pre-breach versus post-breach.
Yes.
Pre-breach is all about how clever are we, and you know, how good is our AI system for looking for the threats and doing the threat hunting and all of that kind of stuff. Post-breach, there's only one thing that matters, which is, can we get back?
Yes.
How quickly can we get back? So in the context of incident response, talk to us about organizations that take the human side of things seriously versus the ones that don't. What differentiates them?
I think one thing is firstly recognizing before a breach, you know, what can happen with an incident, being prepared for it, understanding that it's something that does happen. So testing for it, planning for it, running simulations or tabletop exercises, a great way to see how teams collaborate or don't, where there might be gaps in tooling, in systems, but also in teams, in processes, in communication. So I think one thing is having that recognition that this is real, this happens, and we should be prepared for if we do have an incident. But also within that, recognizing the human cost, because this can cause huge stress. You know, I don't need to tell you what a toll it can take on teams and organizations, both the security team, but also beyond. A breach can affect a whole organization in terms of the stress and the burden it can put on people. So a more mature, positive cybersecurity culture will recognize that as well.
And are there things that organizations should be doing to kind of help their security teams, in particular psychologically, with the stress and that kind of stuff? So we do see a lot of burnout.
Yeah.
You know, I've personally seen a lot of people jump out of the industry completely and just go into another field because it's just too much for them.
Yeah.
Is there an organizational responsibility there?
I think so. And I think it's, you know, there's that responsibility for the people, but also for the organization. We don't want to lose people who are experienced and who can bring so much to the table. And I think there's different layers of what an organization can do. One is, of course, tooling and making sure people are prepared, that they're trained, that they're confident in the tools, and that they feel they have the tools that help them. But also it's about providing that support for people and having a culture when something goes wrong, that you're not looking at who to blame, but what went wrong and what can we do to fix it without wanting to point the finger.
That's an interesting one. We speak a lot about one of the biggest gaps, I think, right now in resilience culture, and one of the biggest risks, therefore, to organizations is the gap that exists between the traditional infrastructure team, for us, the backup people, and the security team. Different languages, different measurement criteria. The board have separate conversations with those two leaders very often, and that only leads to more risk. That gap is a really, really big problem. You know, I think psychology and putting humans together to try to bridge that gap is incredibly important. And we're even building a platform in Unity that brings those disciplines together, so those teams have one platform to share, which is important as well. If I were to put you in front of a board of directors, clean sheet of paper, and your job was to just change one thing in their mindset that would lead them to be a more resilient organization overall, what would that be?
I think it would be helping them to consider the culture of their organization and how cybersecurity fits with that culture. So often, I think in cybersecurity, we can talk about values that maybe are at odds with the wider organizational values, which might be of positivity, it might be of productivity.
Right.
And so we can think in cybersecurity, actually, what do we do to align with those wider corporate values? And having that conversation, I think, can help a board see that cybersecurity is there to enable the business.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So look, we're going to run out of time. We knew that was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be remiss of me if I didn't just ask you to leave our audience with a couple of takeaways. What do you want this audience to consider as they come away from the podcast?
I think one thing is how you frame the idea of the human element of cybersecurity and thinking so much wider than just awareness. I think also considering mindset, that having that learning mindset rather than a fixed mindset in cybersecurity is so important, particularly when it comes to an incident. One of the biggest issues I see is where individuals or teams feel the pressure to know it all and to have all the answers. But actually, if we can build a culture where people can say, I don't know, let's find out together, or let's ask somebody else, that can really help with individual, team, and organizational resilience.
Amazing. Boards, please take notice. Leaders, please take notice. Jessica, thank you so much for being with us in New York for the SHIFT event,
Sure.
First of all, but particularly for me for being on the Strive podcast. I've been looking forward to this, as I say. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Darren.
Yes, as expected, we've run short on time in this episode of Strive, and we need to wrap up our conversation on the human side of cyber resilience. Thanks to Jessica once again for bringing us such a powerful perspective on how behaviour, trust and empathy shape our ability to respond under pressure. If you'd like to explore some more insights and stories on this topic, please do visit readyverse.com. And in the meantime, thanks for joining us. And until next time, I'll see you in the next one.